dropped a 9 in the mail. Kinda fool to say a cooler head prevail. Hammer cock, struck the head on the nail. I'm the caveman.
Hey guys, what's going on? Matt the Caveman Q here again. Palo Problem Island, MattTheCaveman.com. Another edition of Monday Nights with Mike, live stream Q&A. Ask me anything, health related. You may hear the song still playing in the background. Just wanted to make sure the audio was still good this week. Hey, Maddie, Steph, what's up, guys? Is soy giving men man boobs? Yeah, moobs. I like it. All right, and the answer is probably. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. As you saw, yes, today's video, we're talking a lot about, is it a good idea to be vegetarian and or vegan while you are pregnant? So we'll talk a lot about that in a little bit. But for now, before we get started on that paper, obviously, as you know, put your questions down below or on the side, wherever it is on your screen. And yeah, I'll go in with those. Now, with those questions, obviously it's open Q&A, anything you want to know. But before, again, we get into the actual topic of the day, we have here the very first jar of fire cream. All right. Obviously, you might have seen online and everything. There are otherwise. But we have it now. That's my first jar. I know Hugh McKennan's got it. A couple of my partners got it as well. So hopefully by the end of the week, we'll be able to get them out to everybody else. So, yeah. Let's get started, though. Let's hop onto the paper. So, boom. Is vegetarianism healthy for children? And now this is a pretty brand new paper right here. It actually came out on, February 23rd of this year. And what we're talking about here, it was in the journal, the Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition. And I will put a link to that down below in the YouTube, and I'll also make sure I drop that down below. Actually, I'll drop it down there right now for the Facebook people watching right now live. Hold on. I will put that in. Boom, boom, boom. So if you want to follow along, you can follow it at that link. That is to the full live audio. Maddie, thank you for confirming that the audio is good, because that was a concern after last week. I was an idiot for the first 10 minutes. All right. So according to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the organization which runs registered dietitians and nutrition in general, they are the go-to organization, quote unquote. Although, as a lot of you know, that's part of the reason why I didn't go the RD route, is because I don't believe in a lot of their recommendations. However, in their position statement, which is basically them saying, this is what we believe to be true, well, that they said is that vegetarianism, meat and seafood can be replaced with milk, soy and legumes, and eggs without any negative effects in children. Now, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or the USDA, endorses a similar view. The present paper argues that the AND ignores or gives short shrift to direct and indirect evidence that vegetarianism may be associated with serious risks for brain and body development in fetuses and children. Regular supplementation with iron, zinc, and B12 will not mitigate all of these risks. Let's repeat this again. Vegetarianism may be associated with serious risks for brain and body development in fetuses and children, and regular supplementation with iron, zinc, and B12 will not mitigate all of these risks. Okay, we're going to get more into why that's the case throughout the course of this video, but that's a key thing there. Yes, as an adult, once your brain is already fully developed, you may be able to get away with a properly designed vegetarian vegan diet. You may not notice too many deleterious health consequences, but as a child, it's a very, very bad idea. And particularly as a pregnant mother, it's not necessarily the best idea. So, consequently, we cannot decisively say that vegetarianism or veganism is safe for children. So, let's get right into it. So, vegetarian or lacto-ovo-vegetarian diets, which do not include meat, fowl, or seafood. Vegan diets do not include any animal source food, so no honey and none of the other stuff like that. Well, according to the AND, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, their position statement on vegetarianism, appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets, are appropriate for all stages of life, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence. and may provide health benefits in the prevention of certain diseases. Now, the USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, treats vegetarianism and veganism as healthy alternatives. Both the AND and the USDA recommend that vegetarians replace meat and seafood primarily with soy and other legumes, dairy, and eggs. According to the USDA, vegans can substitute fortified soy products for dairy and eggs. All right, but I'm just going to plow right through here. Is there sufficient evidence to say definitively that an appropriately planned diet, vegan or vegetarian diet, adhering to USA's recommendations is healthy for all stages of the life cycle, however? Well, there have been a number of long-term epidemiological studies on adult vegetarians and vegans, the results of which suggest that although vegetarians have a lower incidence of certain diseases, all-cause mortality is comparable in populations of vegetarians and omnivores. So basically what they're saying there is that those 4 papers right there, Appleby et al., or 3 papers, Appleby et al., 2016, Key, Appleby, and Rosell, 2006, and Mirsalahaliya, yeah, that guy, et al., in 2017, what those 3, amongst others, have shown is that the all-cause mortality, so basically anything that could kill you, the ability to the length of your life and the particular risk of certain diseases, anything that's going to kill you in the end, whether you're a vegetarian or you're omnivorous, you're basically going to end up at the end of the day with a similar lifespan. There's no real major health benefit overall. Now, moving past that, again, that's the adults. There is also much less evidence concerning the health effects of meatless diets in children. The present paper focuses on the consequences the consequences of vegetarianism and veganism for children from conception till the end of the growing period. It does not argue that vegetarianism or veganism is unhealthy for children, but considers whether there is enough evidence to justify the AND's unqualified statement, which suggests that there is definitive evidence that vegetarian vegan diets can be healthy for children as diets that include meat and seafood. Basically, we're not saying that it's a bad idea, just that there's not enough evidence to say that it is definitively a good idea or definitively an option. So that's what we're looking at here. While I personally, based on what I've seen and what we're going to go through here, don't think it's a great idea, particularly during the pregnancy part. We'll get to that in a second. But what we're looking at here is that the evidence as of right now does not seem to indicate that we can make definitive yes statements that yes, it is going to be okay. All right? So it will be argued that the AND ignores and gives short shrift to evidence that vegetarianism may be harmful during pregnancy, that milk, soy, legumes, and eggs are not equal substitutes for meat, and that realistic vegetarian diets put children at risk for deficiencies that may have both short-term and permanent negative health consequences. Let's say that again. That realistic vegetarian diet, so what these kids are actually going to be eating, not these perfectly planned diets that may be appropriately planned, as it says, they're generally probably not going to do that. In most cases, they're going to be at risk for deficiencies that have both short-term and permanent negative health consequences. All right, so let's get into this. Excuse me. So, vegetarianism during pregnancy. Regarding the effect of vegetarianism during pregnancy, the AND says that limited research indicates that where food access is adequate, vegetarian pregnancy outcomes such as birth weight and pregnancy duration are similar in those of the non-vegetarian pregnancy. This is an incomplete summary of the evidence. Now, in most populations, the male to female sex ratio of newborns is around 105 to 100. Basically, for every 100 women that are born, girls that are born, there are 105 boys. Now, environmental stress is associated with a lower sex ratio due to the selective spontaneous abortion of male fetuses. Basically, if you're going to have a boy, it's actually a more stressful event for the mother. Now, let's be very clear. There are biological distinctions between boys and girls, all right? It's not binary, it's bimodal. What I mean by that is that, yes, the vast majority are going to be boys or girls, There are intersections in between, but the fact of the matter is, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, 99.6% are going to be boy or girl. And in this case, about 105 are going to be boys and 100 are going to be girls. Don't be playing that kind of game, bucko. All right, Steph? You know damn well that's bimodal. Now, moving along there. Boys, they are biologically more difficult on mother. All right? As such, malnutrition specifically has been linked to a lower sex ratio. One possible test of whether vegetarianism is healthy during pregnancy is to determine whether it has an effect on the sex ratio of the newborns. If it is healthy, it should have no effect on or raise the sex ratio. If unhealthy, then vegetarianism should lower it. Essentially, if malnutrition is not associated with these particular issues, then there should not be a drop in sex ratio, meaning there should be either an equal amount of boys being born or possibly even more. Consequence, on the converse, sorry, I was saying consequent. On the converse of that, if it is not healthy, then there should be more girls being born. Now, Hudson and Buckley found that among a sample size of 6,000 pregnant women at a British hospital, about 5% of whom were vegetarian, and almost all of whom were white. It's okay to be white. The sex ratio was considerably lower among children born to vegetarians compared with those born to omnivores, which was an 81.5 to 100 ratio versus 106 to 100 ratio. So the omnivores were right around what previous studies have shown, which is the ratio about 105 to 100, that one boy more on average, whereas the vegetarians had an 81.5, meaning that 85%, or 85 to 1, or sorry, 81.5 ratio of boys to girls, which means that vegetarians were 23% less likely to give birth to a boy. Given the known association between environmental stress, including malnutrition, and a lower chance of giving birth to a boy, a possible explanation for these findings is that vegetarianism increases the chance of spontaneous abortion, particularly for male fetuses. Now, what they're saying there is that if you were going to have a boy, odds are you had a miscarriage. So that's what a spontaneous abortion is. Isn't that you just popped into a Planned Parenthood and got an abortion? No. Spontaneous abortion is the fancy term for a miscarriage. Point being, because malnutrition is associated with that lower sex ratio due to miscarriages or spontaneous abortions, what we're looking at here is that there appear to have been more spontaneous abortions because that vegetarian and or vegan diet resulted in a malnutrition on the aspect or on the part of the mother. In turn, a lot of those boys just didn't make it. They had more miscarriages. Now, the A&D does not mention Hudson and Buckley's study or the effect of vegetarianism, veganism on the sex ratio to spontaneous abortion in its position statement on veganism or on vegetarianism. As discussed below, vegetarians and vegans are at risk for a number of nutritional deficiencies that could potentially harm the fetus. So you're saying that if I want a girl next to go vegetarian again, and yes, so here's the deal. If you would like to have increase your chances of having a girl, yes, you probably could do better off if you're going vegan. But let's add, and the future is female, right? Now, having said that, you could do that, but then you could also risk going a couple of years of miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. Now, of course, obviously, some are going to come to term. Like they said, there was a ratio that actually made it. So yes, they are going to actually come to term. But you could also just as likely end up with a soy boy. So, yeah. Moving on. Are milk, soy, and eggs equally beneficial substitutes for meat? The A&D, the USDA, and other health authorities claim that dairy and legumes, especially soy, and to a lesser extent eggs, can be substituted for meat with no ill effects. The section examines the evidence that raises doubt about its position. He did say it. Yes, he did. Now, there has been only one controlled study on the effects of milk versus meat consumption in children. Subjects in the study were 6 to 14 years old with a median age of 7.4 years in Embu, Kenya. Now, due to poverty, the children were largely vegetarian, with more than 75% of their energy intake coming from maize and beans. Less than 6% were coming from animal sources. Their daily intake of milk and meat was very low at approximately 35 grams and 11 grams, respectively. Researchers divided a large group of the children into 4 conditions: meat, milk, energy, and control. And every school day, children in the meat, milk, and energy groups received a local plant-based dish supplemented with 60 grams of ground beef, 200 milliliters of milk, or an extra 3 grams of oil, respectively. Now, the meals in each of these groups had approximately the same number of calories. Children in the control group did not receive any extra meals. It's messed up. You guys get to starve. No, I think they just got like whatever they got. But anyway, the researchers measured several outcomes related to growth, intellectual ability, school performance, and social behavior. After 2.25 years, the meat group had the best health outcomes. The meat group showed the greatest improvement on the Raven's Progressive Matrices, or RPM, which is a measure of fluid intelligence. So, to give you an idea, when you test IQ, generally you're testing for a more concrete intelligence, one that doesn't really change over life. Whereas the RPM, the Raven's Progressive Matrices, what that basically tests is fluid, more what you're absorbing over a short period of time. You can lose some of it and you can gain some, whereas your IQ is more static based on your entirety of your life, based on what age you are. But anyway, moving past that. While the milk group actually showed the least improvement, significantly below the other 3 groups, including the control. While all groups started off with roughly the same RPM scores, milk ended up approximately 0.65 standard deviations higher than, meat ended up approximately 0.65 standard deviations higher than milk. Now, corresponding to a difference of around 10 IQ points. Now, the meat and energy group showed significantly more improvement on arithmetic tests than the milk and the control. The meat group showed a significantly larger increase in the end of term test scores compared to the others, with the greatest increase being in the arithmetic subtest. Over the course of the study, the meat group had the highest levels of physical activity during free play, the greatest increase in leadership activities, and the greatest increase in initiative behavior. The milk group had the lowest level of physical activity and leadership and initiative behavior among the intervention groups. Regarding growth, only children in the milk group who were below the age of 6 or had stunted growth experienced a greater rate of height increase. Now, all 3 intervention groups experienced an improvement in weight gain relative to the control. Children in the meat group gained approximately 50% more mid-arm, upper arm muscle area than those who were in the milk group, and 100% more than those in the energy and control. So let's break that down a little bit before we get back. Basically, if you were in the meat group, you ended up basically smarter, more active, and more assertive, more able to end up in a leadership role. And you also ended up with about 100% more muscle mass in the mid-upper arm area, so basically bicep, than those in the energy control groups, whereas the milk group saw some muscle mass gain, but saw decreases in everything else. Either way, meat group so far, definitely taking the lead. Now, Newman et al. In 2007 suggested that the improved cognitive performance increased physical activity and leadership and initiative behaviors in the milk group. In the meat group, they may be due to their consumption of vitamin B12 and more bioavailable iron and zinc, since meat improved the absorption of iron and zinc from fiber and phytate-rich plant staples. Micronutrients and high-quality protein in meat may be important for cognitive performance. And as to why the milk group obtained the lowest scores on the RPM, Newman et al. Suggest this may be due to the high casein and calcium content in the milk, which interferes with the iron absorption, which is also essential for cognitive performance. They attribute the increase in mid-upper arm muscle area in the meat group to the increase of zinc and complete protein, which promote both protein synthesis, and the iron protein, which is essential for myoglobin synthesis in the striated muscle. Basically, breaking that down, like I said before, the micronutrients that you're getting from the meat and the breakdown of phytates and other products that may interfere with the bioavailability, the absorption of those particular micronutrients, well, meat is a better source of those, better source of complete proteins as well. Whereas the milk group, unfortunately, the casein and the calcium in the milk may interfere with the iron and zinc, which in turn may lead to deleterious effects on both cognitive performance and just on activity levels. As you guys know, I'm not really a fan of casein. When it comes to dairy, whey is the way. Do you know the way, right? So, this study of Kenyan Kenyan knuckles, right? Do you know the way? This study of Kenyan children does not decisively refute the AND's claim that appropriated planned, that's a typo. Appropriated means when you steal something. Appropriately means planning something properly, right? So the appropriated planned vegetarian vegan diets can be as healthy as diets that include meat. For one thing, none of the children were on diets meeting the USDA's recommendations. Also, it is unfortunate that the study compared meat and milk supplementation with oil supplementation rather than soy. Yeah, if we were making a direct comparison, soy would have been the better bet. Moreover, the study does not say whether a soy product such as tofu could produce equal outcomes to meat. However, the AND and the USDA say that dairy can be used as a substitute to meat, and the Kenyan study cast serious doubt on that claim. Luke is not a fan of casein either, but he has no choice. Have you played around with cow's milk? With goat's milk at all, Natty? The reason why, I've talked about this before, but the type of casein that you find in goat versus in cow's milk is, well, most cows are, alpha, is it alpha or beta? It's either alpha 1 or beta A1. Yeah, alpha 1 protein casein versus alpha 2. Or is it beta? I'm pulling that up. Well, it's either alpha or beta. Let's see. Casein, alpha. Nope. Is it beta 1? Beta A1. A1, A2. Okay. So yes, cow's milk is A1, whereas goat's milk is A2. There are cows that produce A1 casein, but that A1 is a slightly more harder on the system. It's a little bit harder to digest, whereas the A2 is slightly easier to digest. As such, people that have issues with dairy, with cow's milk, with cow's milk, may be able to do a little bit better with goat's milk. But okay, why is whey better than casein? All I know about casein is that it is touted as a slow release, and a lot of bodybuilders drink it before bed. All right, funny enough, Steph, that was actually my very, very first Ask Mike the Caveman, had to do with whether you should be doing dairy or not. And when it comes to dairy, I'll go on this on a side note. Even though this particular study for kids is showing that it may not be the best bet, from my own personal perspective, provided you can handle dairy. Now, that does bring into another aspect. This was done in Kenyans. It would be interesting to see how the results would turn out on Europeans. And the reason why is that about 75% of individuals of African descent are unable to properly digest lactose. They don't necessarily do well with dairy. So the casein, and there are the Maasai tribe and a couple of others that have done that. That's probably 25% that, those that actually were pastoralists and had access to cows and dairy and whatnot. Yeah, they probably do a little better. But that other 75% generally don't do too well on dairy. Particulars, in Embu, Kenya, I don't know what their genetic history is regarding the dairy access. But point being, when it comes to dairy, there are four main aspects. There's the lactose, the casein, the whey, and the milk fat. Generally speaking, people have issues with either the lactose or the casein. When you see allergies and sensitivities, part of the reason why is that casein, from a biochemical standpoint, mimics gliadin, which is, part of the gluten complex. So it's reason why when you see ADHD and autism-related diets, a lot of times they're removing gluten and casein. Why? They cross-react. So if you have problems with gluten or any of the other grain-related prolamines, zyme, evenin, or zein, or any of those, odds are you probably might have, you have a higher potential risk of having issues with casein as well. So if you have gut issues and you have intestinal permeability, that casein protein can get through and cause some particular issues. Whey, on the other hand, whey has a lot of potential benefits. Whey is generally benign at worst and phenomenal at best. The reason being, the percentage of people that are allergic or sensitive to whey is very, very low. Having said that, I've met people that have that issue. But for the most part, most people are not going to have issues with whey. And if you do tolerate whey pretty well, it's one of the best ways of right, of producing glutathione. So it's one of the best exogenous sources that can lead to endogenous production of glutathione, which is basically it causes your body to produce that. And glutathione is basically one of the master antioxidants. So good stuff. All right. No, I haven't. I'm scared. He had a really bad reaction to milk again last month. His eyes were swollen. And so we are going to hold off until he gets allergic. Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea, Maddie. Understandable. And it was lactose-free milk, the Fairlife brand, that he had the bad reaction to. Understandable. So yeah, again, particularly if it is casein, I would be looking at the goat milk. And I vaguely remember you telling me about that, so, Okay, I love whey. I probably have gut issues, but I've had a hard time eating food, and whey helps me get a lot of protein. It doesn't seem to bother me. Plus glutathione precursors. Yeah. I don't know if you posted that before I went over to that, but yes, exactly. The idea is that while casein will generally really lead to gut issues, whey, on the other hand, basically no gut issues for the most part. Maybe 1 to 2% of the population. I forget the exact number, but it's pretty close to that. It's damn low. Whereas it is the single best glutathione precursor. So yes, that's what I was saying. So in terms of exogenous food sources, things that you can eat dietarily to increase the production or act as a precursor to glutathione, whey is pretty much number one. So yes, 100%. So moving past that, this study of Kenyan children does not decisively refute the A&D's claims of an appropriately planned diet. Oh, sorry, we talked about that before. But the other aspects of the Kenyan study cast doubt on the claim. Moreover, the children in the milk group had significantly worse outcomes than those in the meat group. Again, it'd be interesting to see what kind of reaction they're having in the gut to that. Could be that these are individuals who are lactose intolerant and or have specific issues to casein, which in turn could be leading to an increased intestinal permeability, leaky gut, which in turn, well, if you have gut dysbiosis going on from that leaky gut, you can end up with issues going on to your brain. So, your gut is your second brain, talked about that before. The production of different neurotransmitters and just, the gut connection between the vagus nerve up to the brain could end up leading to decreases in cognitive performance simply because it messed up your gut. So it would be really interesting. Now, particularly since that's a moderately older study, Newman did these studies in 2003 and 2007, and then there was a follow-up in 2014, but odds are I'd be very surprised if they did much gut microbiome testing out in Embu, Kenya on this particular study. Either way, that would be interesting to see both genetically and microbiome related to their microbiome, how those different factors might be it. Plus living out in Africa, probably a higher risk of infection. So different things could be interesting to see what differences there are there. But moving past that, despite the limitations of the study, it is still the only controlled experiment comparing the benefits of milk versus meat in children, and they suggest that milk is not an equal substitute for meat. The A&D does not mention this study in its position statement. So far, the pregnancy statement wasn't mentioned. The statement here on milk versus meat and non-vegetarian sources in the Kenyan children, not mentioned. And again, the key is why this particular paper is making a point of this is the fact that the A&D, which is the go-to source, it's the one that actually registered type, the one that actually licenses and certifies registered dietitians. The problem is that's their go-to organization. These are the guys saying this is nutrition law, period. This is what you have to follow. And they came out with a position statement saying that vegetarian and vegan diets are okay, Not only that, if they are appropriately planned, they're okay, but people will assume, oh, just vegan, vegetarian, plant-based diets are fine. They have to be appropriately planned, first of all. But they said that they're appropriately planned. If they're appropriately planned, they're good for all stages of life cycle. But they had that unqualified definitive statement without there being much evidence on children. And these particular ones here, the first one was on pregnancy, now we're talking about children. They didn't include these, is what they're saying. But moving forward, acne vulgaris. Contrary to orthopedic claims that diet is unrelated to acne, I don't know who the hell is repeating that claim, but either way, there is overwhelming evidence that diet is a major factor in acne. I personally know from experience that when I do experience any kind of breakout, it's generally because I had the wrong kind of stuff, whether it be conventional dairy, accidental gluten exposure, those things kind of tend to give me a little bit of acne, particularly after training and stuff. If I'm, my diet's clean and everything, never get an issue. Whereas if I have some garbage in my diet, then yeah, it's going to happen. Now, acne appears to be absent in populations that have not adopted a Western diet. For example, the Catawbans of Trobriand Island live by horticulture and fishing. They consume virtually no dairy or alcohol and have a negligible amount of cereals, sugar, and salt in their diet. Stefan Lindbergh examined 1,200 Catawbans for the presence of acne. All 1,200 were at least 10 years old, and 300 were between 15 and 25 years old. Lindbergh did not find one single pustule, or open condom in any of the 1,200 Catawbans. So basically, no acne at all. Now, the Ake of Paraguay engage in a combination of hunting and gathering and farming. Western foods, such as wheat and sugar, comprise only 8% of their diet. Hurtado examined 115 Ake, including 15 who were between the ages of 15 and 25. After Hurtado's examinations, family practitioner physicians conducted the same examination every 6 months for 2 years. And again, not a single pustule, or open comedo was observed in the entire population. The non-existence of acne among Catawbans and the Ake could not be explained entirely by genetics. Moreover, westernized South American Indians and Pacific Islanders show high rates of acne, though not as high as the white population. Having said that, Cordain et al. Hypothesized that acne in Western populations is caused by diet-induced hyperinsulinemia, and this could explain the relationship between meat and acne. Despite its low glycemic load, dairy triggers a large insulin response. Observational studies have found a significant association between dairy intake and acne in adolescents, which, as I mentioned before, when consuming grass-fed dairy, no big deal. Conventionally raised dairy, if I have some of that on the sides, if I go out to eat, I am still human, I'll have some cheese every once in a while, not going to stress it too much. Having said that, the times where I decide to do that, yeah, could get some breakouts. Now, controlled experiments have found that a high protein, low insulin response triggering diet significantly improves symptoms in acne patients. While there is still a debate about exactly why dairy consumption is associated with acne, the association appears to be causal and significant. Now, acne is a negative health outcome that is expensive to treat and which has a strong association with depression and suicide in adolescents. There is reason to believe that substituting dairy for meat increases the risk of developing acne during childhood adolescence, assuming it would involve consuming more dairy on average than omnivores. This is a negative health outcome not discussed in the AND's position statement on vegetarianism. So, key here, what were the recommendations by AND? That, yeah, you can include dairy as your alternative if you're going vegetarian. And as a general rule, I would agree with that under the conditions that A, you are of a genetic lineage that has historical use to that, and B, you are mindful of the fact that the casein in particular is problematic. So, if you're noticing that you're getting acne from dairy, I would lean more towards full fat, but exclusively grass-fed sources. Moreover, I would also lean towards fermented, and in some cases, ideally, I personally would go with raw. Now, I can't necessarily recommend that you take raw milk, but if you live in a location where that's available, I would personally try it. So we'll leave it at that. Now, soy and other legumes. Time for the soy boys. Phytoestrogens, particularly isoflavones, are found in high concentration in legumes, and particularly in soy. Vegetarians, vegans tend to have very high blood pressures. That's not true. Very high blood levels of phytoestrogens compared with omnivores. While phytoestrogens have been associated with some health benefits in adults, there are serious concerns about the potential negative health effects on infants and children. So, soy breast milk formula, or soy formula instead of breast milk. Words together, correct order, right? So, yes, utilizing soy-based infant formulas instead of breast milk could be majorly problematic. So, animal studies have shown that interfering with estrogen during critical periods of development lead to a myriad of diverse health outcomes, including malformations of the ovary, uterus, mammary gland, and prostate, early puberty, reduced fertility, and disrupted brain organization. So if it wasn't enough that you're going to end up with a messed up reproductive system, you're also going to be less viable of having children of your own, and your brain could be screwed up. Awesome. Now, Powdesol and Jefferson note that these consequences correspond to some public health trends that emerged in Western countries, which have occurred in tandem with greater consumption of soy. North and Golding found that males born to vegetarian mothers in England were 3.5 times as likely to have hypospadias, or malformed genitalia, which was statistically linked to the consumption of high phytoestrogen legumes. Hypospadias rates were 2.2% and 0.6% for boys born to vegetarian and omnivorous mothers, respectively. So, the brain part is probably true for me. Thanks, Mom, for soy formula. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is possible to survive the soy formula. I'm pretty sure that I had soy formula. Pretty sure. Either way, off topic, my menses have never been the same since I was vegan and consumed a decent amount of soy at that time. I haven't touched soy in almost 4 years, but developed cysts and everything. Yep, unfortunately, that is the case. And going back to it again there, it says it right there. Could explain a lot of what's going on in this world today. I'll just leave it at that. 90s parents. Yeah, I mean, 90s parents. Most parents today are still giving soy to their kids. Let's be very real here. Most people don't necessarily keep up with what's actually science is saying. So realistically, it's not necessarily the 90s parents' fault. But move it, and really it would be 80s parents for us, all right? Because even though we were 90s kids, we were born in the 80s, so we were actually, if you were drinking soy formula when you were like 3 or 4, probably a bad idea. Just anyway. Rodent studies, So based on animal studies, again, as we saw, can lead to major problems in the reproductive system. And as we said before, that the vegetarian mothers, now the first one was animal studies showing the malformations. But the malformed genitalia in the English children, it was basically, 4 times more likely in vegetarians than in omnivorous mothers. So that's one of those fun ones where the relative risk versus the absolute risk, right? Where 2.2% versus 0.6%. Yeah, all things considered, it's a moderately rare condition. Odds are your kid's genitalia are probably going to be fine overall. But the relative risk, you have a 400% more worse risk if you are a vegetarian mother. Yeah, sure, it's 2.2 versus 0.6, 3.5 times. So you have a 350% more risk of having malformed genitalia of your child if you're a vegetarian when you're a mother. Go post that everywhere because it's right there. Just look that up right there. You have the link up below, up above, so you can pull that one up or wherever it is on your screen, but whatever. Yeah, 350% more likely to have a child with malformed genitalia as a vegetarian. Cool. Now, Rodent studies have shown that phytoestrogens such as genistein, which is abundant in soy, interfere with the development of brain regions that are sensitive to estrogen levels in both male and female rodents. Regions that are sexually dimorphic, meaning they are different between the bimodal domains of male and female. All right. Now, whether or to what extent these findings generalize to humans is of course uncertain. Now, Jefferson, Padilla Banks, and Newbold found that administering genistein to neonatal female mice at environmentally relevant doses, basically i.e. doses comparable to what human neonates can be exposed to, newborns, led in later life to abnormal estrus cycles, altered ovarian function, early reproductive senescence, and sub/infertility. Nagao et al. Obtained similar results, but again, it's unclear whether these are generalizable to humans. Point being, well, if you are giving those babies too much soy, could lead to some major problems, both brain and reproductive system down the line. All right, anti-nutrients, iron and zinc absorption. Legumes, particularly soy, are high in phytate, which significantly inhibits the absorption of minerals including iron and zinc. Iron and zinc deficiency can have devastating effects in children/fetuses. Iron deficiency in infancy leads to impaired processing speed, affect or emotion basically, learning, and memory. Zinc deficiency during pregnancy increases the risk of preterm delivery. So you might have to get into that NICO, right? In children, it can impair growth, cause hypogonadism in males, neurosensory disorders, and other problems. So, not having enough iron, big deal. More reproductive issues, more brain issues, more cognitive and emotional issues. The AND acknowledges that the high phytate content of vegetarian diets interferes with iron and zinc absorption, and that the bioavailability of non-heme iron of plants, dairy, and eggs is lower than that of heme iron found in meat and seafood. But the danger of deficiency, particularly in regard to iron, may be greater than the AND suggests in its position statement. So, even though they acknowledge that, non-heme iron, the kind you get in a vegetarian diet, is less bioavailable, it might actually be worse than that. Now, studies on vegetarian diets have generally shown them to be at much greater risk for iron deficiency. How many vegetarians and vegans do you know that were anemic or are anemic, right? Exactly. Although most studies show that vegetarian vegan diets tend to have similar or higher daily intake of iron compared with omnivores, the former tend to have significantly lower mean serum ferritin concentrations due to the lower bioavailability of iron in the vegetarian diet. So yes, while on an absolute level that non-heme iron may be higher from those plant-based sources, the problem is that because it's less bioavailability, you're not actually going to have much iron in circulation. That's why your serum ferritin levels are going to be lower. Your body just can't really use it that well. Now, Wilson and Ball, for example, found that among Australian men, iron intake among vegetarians and vegans was 29 to 49% higher than that of the omnivores, but their serum ferritin concentrations were much lower. Vegetarians had mean concentrations of 64, vegans 65, and omnivores 121 nanograms per milliliter. None of the omnivores in that sample, but 20.5% of vegetarians and 30% of vegans had low concentrations of less than 25 nanograms per milliliter. And 3% of vegetarians and 25% of vegans were technically deficient with ferritin concentrations of less than 12. The other studies cited above report similar findings. So, breaking that down, while the amount of iron dietarily that the Australian men were taking in on vegetarian vegan diets versus omnivorous, they were taking in almost 50%, 30 to 50% more. But they had significantly lower, roughly half on average. And at the extremes, they were much, much lower, likely more like they're much more likely to have extremely low and more deficient outcomes. But it's like a quarter of vegans were technically iron deficient. 3% of vegetarians and 25% of vegans, despite taking in significantly more iron. Explain that one. Riddle me that, right? But most studies found that vegans and vegetarians tend to have a zinc intake that is similar to omnivores, and to have a slightly to moderately elevated risk of deficiency. So again, while they take in similar amounts of zinc, they are more likely to be deficient. Why? Low serum zinc levels can again be caused in both vegetarians and omnivores by high phytate intake. So the phytate, it binds up, it locks and chelates up those minerals. Not good. But having said that, lightly steaming and cooking your vegetables can break down that phytate action. There are also bacteria, so probiotic bacteria and enzymes that can act to break down that phytate and make them more bioavailable, or improve bioavailability is what I was trying to say. So yeah, lightly steam, parboil your vegetables, saute them perhaps. That should actually break down that phytate. So even if you're on the vegetarian vegan diet, talk about that before. You don't want to go raw if you're worried about your zinc or iron. Now, eggs. What about those lovely eggs? Big fan. Eggs are a high. Hold on 1 second. Reconnected. You may have lost me. Broadcast interrupted. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. My OBS went down. Hopefully, we are still rolling. All right. Sorry, guys. Now, if you are there and you still hear me, please put down below. Yeah, let me know that we're still here. All right, we're back. Awesome. Thanks, Maddie. The joys of the internet. So, eggs are a high quality source of protein and iron and zinc. They may be promising as a substitute for meat. However, there are a few reasons to question whether it would be healthy for a pregnant woman and children to rely exclusively on eggs as a primary source of these nutrients. One whole egg contains approximately 1 milligram of non-heme iron and 1 milligram of zinc, which corresponds to about 10% of the USDA's recommended daily allowance for each of these minerals in children aged 9 to 12. Because the iron is in the less bioavailable non-heme form, and because egg consumption itself reduces iron absorption, children would have to consume somewhat more than the RDA of iron from eggs in order to meet their requirements. So an egg contains roughly 6 grams of protein, which is roughly 11% of the RDA for males 14 and older. Children who are relying on eggs as a major source or even their primary source of protein, iron, and zinc will, depending on their age, sex, and body size, have to eat several every day in order to meet the USDA's recommendations. And this may be an unrealistic dietary plan. The omega-6 to omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid ratio in eggs is a little over 15 to 1, and eggs would therefore contribute to the already high omega-6 to omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid ratio of vegetarian diet. As such, as shall be discussed below, there is a possibility that a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio promotes chronic systemic inflammation and the pathogenesis of autoimmune diseases. How about children eating Play-Doh? Yes, not a good idea. Jesus, take the wheel. Nope, exactly. So, Play-Doh, not really the best idea, but going back to this for a second, I will actually push back on that a little bit on their assessment of the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio of that 50 or 6 to 3 ratio of 15 to 1 in eggs. Odds are that is in conventionally raised eggs. I would believe, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it before, but I don't have the source up on hand, that pasture-raised eggs, particularly those that may even be supplemented with some flax and other things that are precursors of omega-3s, would potentially have a higher rate or a better ratio, a better split. Having said that, yeah, odds are on a vegetarian vegan diet in general, you're going to have a bad 6 to 3 ratio because most plants, most beans, most oils, the vegetable oils are very, very high in omega-6. And that is a big deal. the 6:3 ratio. That's the reason why they want you to supplement with fish oil or eat more fish in general, is because they assume most people aren't going to reduce their omega-6 intake. So what are they going to say? Just mega dose on omega-3s and you'll be ready to rock. But moving past that, potential deficiencies and their consequences for brain and body development. As mentioned in the previous sections, the A&D acknowledges that vegetarians must pay close attention to their iron and zinc intake, though its position statement may underestimate the risk of deficiency. This section discusses vegetarians' risk of deficiencies in vitamin B12, creatine, taurine, and long-chain omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which could have serious health consequences for children. Although the A&D notes that vegetarian diets are low in B12 and long-chain omega-3 PUFAs, it may underestimate the risk of B12 deficiency and the negative consequences of lower long-chain omega-3 fatty acid intake in children. So, B12, Herman et al. Found that B12 deficiency defined at concentrations, I'm just going to skip over the numbers, I'm too lazy right now, in 26% of less than 156 picomole per liter in the 26% of adult vegetarians, 52% of vegans, and 1% of omnivores. The average level of vegans, vegetarians, and omnivores were 148, 192, and 287 picomole per liter, respectively. That 148 picomole is considered clinically deficient in the US, but symptoms of deficiency are known to occur at marginal levels of 148 to 221, meaning that vegetarians and vegans are generally going to show indicate signs and symptoms of B12 deficiency. So, like we saw before, iron and now B12 explains why a vast majority of vegans and vegetarians are in fact anemic. But it should be noted that in the subjects in the Herman et al. Studies, they were recruited from a conference of the German Federation of Vegetarian and a Vegan Society summer camp in the Netherlands. So there is reason to think that these vegetarians and vegans had an above average amount of nutrition education. And indeed, 20% of the vegetarians and 59% of the vegans in that study reported taking B supplements, which did improve their vitamin B12 status. Meaning that in individuals that are not supplementing with the B vitamins, particularly B12, you're probably going to see even higher rates of vitamin B12 deficiency in plant-based populations. Now, there was no significant difference between the B12 levels of vegetarians who took supplements and omnivores. Hey, Liliana, what's up? Yeah, they've been real good, absolutely. Now, which was due in part to extremely high levels among some vegetarians who were taking those supplements. Now, vegans who took supplements still had a marginally low average of around 192, ranging from 125 to 299 picomole per liter. The lowest level among an omnivore in their study was 190. Now, the A&D says that vegans must regularly consume B12 fortified foods or B12 containing supplements, and most vegetarians should do the same. The results of Herman et al. Suggest that even with supplementation, vegans may still tend to cluster in the deficient to borderline deficient range. Vegetarians can achieve adequate B12 levels with supplementation, but some are still deficient and borderline deficient range. Whether it is realistic for vegetarians and vegans to maintain adequate B12 levels throughout their entire childhood via supplementation is an open question. And the consequences of B12 deficiency in childhood from brain and body development are extensive, severe, and can be irreversible, right? Most mothers know don't be deficient in folate, right? Relying on neural tube defects. B12 is just as important for your brain. Super important. You need it. Don't be deficient. All right? Potential consequences include, among many others, impaired cognitive development, school performance, depression, weakness, fatigue, nerve damage, and failure to thrive. Breastfeeding infants whose mothers are vegetarian vegan are also known to be at risk for B12 deficiency. And one of the papers there is by Kuhn, Bubel, and Baumgartner, 1991. And it's even got an umlaut. I've always thought about adding an umlaut to my name, right? That'd be awesome. I wish I had that umlaut. It puts that E at the end too, but whatever. Now, creatine. Creatine is rarely mentioned in discussions of health consequences, except I did a video on why you should be supplementing with creatine. But moving forward, and that's not just for working out, there's a lot of benefits, and we'll be discussing it here. However, there is some little known evidence that creatine consumption may play an important role in cognitive function. Again, if you watch Ask Mike the Caveman, not that little known. But moving forward, in a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, Ray et al. Found that 6 weeks of oral creatine supplementation significantly improved the performance of vegetarians on a timed Raven's Advanced Progressive Matrices test, a measure of fluid intelligence, and the backward digit span test, which is a measure of working memory. The difference in performance between the control and creatine supplement vegetarians was enormous. On the RAPM, the treatment group scored slightly more than 1 standard deviation higher than the control. There was approximately 1 standard deviation difference between the treatment and control on the backward digit span. The former could recall on average 8.5 times, while the 8.5 items, while the latter could recall on average 7.05. However, Rawson et al. Found that creatine supplements had no effect on the RIPM or backward digit span test performance for meat eaters, suggesting that vegetarians had impaired scores due to their low creatine intake. So, whereas the vegetarians, vegans, when they were supplementing with creatine, saw cognitive improvements and working memory improvements, meat eaters didn't see the same effects. Why? Likely due to insufficient creatine intake in vegetarians and vegans. Now, Gale et al. Found that 30-year-olds in Britain who identified as vegetarian, 33.6 of whom admitted to eating fish or chicken, so pescatarians or polotarians, I guess, had at age 10 a mean IQ of 104.8 compared with a mean of approximately 100 for the general population. At age 10, vegans had a mean IQ of 95.1, although the sample size for vegans was low. But to reiterate, Gale et al. Report the IQ of 30-year-old vegetarians when they were 10 years old. Ray et al.'s findings suggest that vegetarianism reduced performance on tests and that have a strong relationship with IQ. It is possible that although vegetarianism appeals to people with higher intelligence, becoming vegetarian reduces fluid intelligence and working memory. Consistent with that possibility, Gale et al. Report that although vegetarians were 2.4 times as likely as omnivores to have higher academic degrees or vocational qualifications, the former had no advantage in terms of annual income. In fact, they were slightly overrepresented in the lowest income bracket and underrepresented in the highest. Gale et al. Suggests that vegetarians may choose lower paying jobs because of ethical considerations, and note that vegetarians are more likely to agree with the statement that the government should redistribute income. However, other studies have found that agreeing with redistributionist policies is associated with, wait for it, a lower IQ. So that's an interesting way that we can go about this here. Could have to do with whether or not it's the chicken or the egg, or the soy or the seed, as it were, right? When we're talking here, which one came first? Is it the fact that people that are generally more intelligent overall are likely to become vegetarian because they think that, yeah, it's the more ethical thing to do? Could have to do with agreeableness and openness, which are big 5 traits that go well beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But conversely, even though they are more intelligent, have higher academic degrees, you have to wonder how much of those are gender studies or, all that fun stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said there, they're more likely to take lower paying income jobs because, yeah, they're more likely to agree with redistributionist, socialist policies, whatever, however you want to put that. They're less likely to be, heads of industry, so they're likely to have lower income, but they're also more willing to accept those jobs because, it's the better thing, it's the right thing to do. I'm trying to save the world. So it's a very interesting how that works out. But Either way, chicken or the egg, soy the seed. But the findings reviewed so far provide suggestive evidence that the lack of creatine intake among vegetarians lowers their fluid intelligence and working memory by approximately 1 standard deviation, corresponding to about 15 IQ points. People may not even notice a reduction in cognitive functioning when they become vegetarian if fluid but not crystallized intelligence is affected. That is to say, becoming vegetarian may impair one's ability to solve problems without causing one to forget what one has learned. So the effect may not be noticeable. The results from Ray et al. Suggest that the impairment is to some extent reversible in adults by means of supplementation and would presumably be reversible by eating meat. So essentially, there is a significant drop seen in individuals becoming vegetarian. I don't eat soy, I'm not vegetarian, and Bernie 2020. The fact that you actually got me to read that statement, I will give you props on that. But yeah. To be fair, Bernie over there is basically paleo, so if there's one thing that I agree with him on, it's his eating patterns. I will give him that. Yeah. Regarding the redistributionist policy, whole different animal. But moving that way, don't eat soy now. But you did also spend plenty of time as a vegetarian. You do have to remember that. So you did spend plenty of time in that world. So maybe during your college years, your IQ dropped by about 15 points, and now it's raised a little bit, but you still have that impaired cognitive functioning from before. Moving forward, there is direct evidence that childhood creatine levels affect not only performance on cognitive effects, but also real-life labor market outcomes in adulthood. As part of the Young Finn study in 1980, researchers measured the urinary concentrations of creatinine in 3,596 Finns aged 3 to 18. Creatinine is a breakdown product of creatine, and so is the former is a proxy for the latter. I was kidding, Maddie, relax. Bockerman et al. 2017 found a significant relationship between subjects' creatinine levels in 1980 and their income 20 years later. A 1 standard deviation increase in creatinine corresponded to an increase of 7.36% in earnings. As the authors note, since urinary creatinine levels do not perfectly reflect actual creatinine levels, their results probably underestimate the true effect of creatine. Basically, what they're trying to say there is that because your body actually utilizes that creatine, both for muscular and for brain purposes, you're probably not peeing out quite as much. And as such, a lot of that creatine you're peeing out might not actually be everything there. So you could actually have an even bigger impact of the creatine on your cognitive performance. And in turn, could have a real-life effect on your earning performance. But we'll get past that. While impaired creatine metabolism has been linked to psychiatric disorders, whether chronic low creatine intake in childhood has non-reversible negative effects on the brain development has not been studied. We cannot say for sure whether long-term creatine supplementation for vegetarian or vegan children would be a solution to this potential problem. Moreover, the AND's 2016 statement does not mention creatine, though its 2009 statement does state that vegetarian athletes may have lower muscle creatine concentration and may benefit from creatine supplementation. Neither the 2016 nor the 2009 statement mentions the possible consequences of chronic low creatine intake for physical and mental development, which are in fact unknown. Either way, based on the evidence at hand, it would behoove the plant-based population to definitely supplement with creatine. And again, the interesting aspects of those studies have to do with both IQ, your actual earning potential, your actual mental and emotional health. So those are some major factors that have nothing to do with capitalism. So just gonna throw that out there. Could explain a lot. Soy boys. Now, taurine. As to the significance of taurine, Wu and Prentice report that taurine demonstrates multiple cellular functions, including a central role as a neurotransmitter, as a trophic factor in CNS development, in maintaining the structural integrity of the membrane, and in regulating calcium transport and homeostasis, as an osmolyte, and as a neuromodulator, and as a neuroprotectant. Basically, if you want your brain to function right, your entire central nervous system, from top to bottom, you're going to want to have taurine. Taurine, you probably knows, oh, it's in Red Bull. It gives you wings, right? So, not saying drink Red Bull, but it's probably the most common place you've seen. Oh, what the hell is taurine? It's amino acid. Anyway, vegetarians and especially vegans have low taurine intake and consequently low levels of plasma taurine and urinary taurine excretion. The effects of chronically low levels of taurine intake as seen in vegetarians and vegans are largely unknown, though there is some direct evidence that low levels in infancy, even if they are within normal range, may impair brain development. Wharton et al. Found that low plasma neonatal taurine was associated with lower scores on the Bayley Mental Development Index at 18 months and the WISC-R arithmetic subtest at arithmetic subtest at 7 years. They suggest that dietary taurine intake may be responsible for the benefits of breast milk for neurodevelopment. And I'd say it's probably more than that, but definitely a major part. And if they are right, however, then consuming breast milk from mothers with low taurine intake, including vegetarian vegans, may put infants at risk for impaired neurodevelopment. Low taurine levels during pregnancy may have an effect on fetal development. So, moms, you need your taurine. Very important. Long-chain omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now, development. Vegans do not consume any I always get messed up on that. Eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, or docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. And vegetarians consume very little. Russell et al. Found that compared with omnivores, vegetarians had concentrations of EPA and DHA that were 27.8 and 31.4% lower, respectively. Plasma concentrations in vegans were 52.8 and 58.6% lower than omnivores. What, did you miss it? Yeah, good sources of taurine, Maddie? Meat. Eat your meat. Yeah, you didn't miss it. They actually didn't specifically mention that. Basically, just that it's lower in animals. So besides Red Bull, which I was joking about, don't give your child Red Bull meat. Eat your meat. It's an amino acid. You'll be fine. Yeah. Anyway, lower omega-3s. Yeah. Found some findings. Could there be negative consequences associated with having low levels of EPA and DHA during childhood? Well, DHA is crucial for brain and retinal, so eye development, particularly in the first 2 years of life. Echeverria et al. Sorry, it's a couple of them there. Yeah. Got it. Must be my low IQ from my years of vegetarian. The first step to having to solving a problem, Maddie, is to admit it. So yes. Now, because omega-3s are super important, their deficiencies are linked to a variety of neurocognitive disorders, including ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and the autism spectrum disorders. The AEND states that the clinical relevance of reduced EPA and DHA status among vegetarians and vegans is unknown. Long-chain omega-3 fatty acids are important for the development and maintenance of the brain, the retina, and cell membranes, and favorably impact pregnancy outcomes and risk for some chronic disease. Yet, vegetarians and vegan children do not appear to experience impairment in visual or mental development. But since, as the AMD itself says, the significance of low EPA and DHA stats among vegetarians is unknown, sorry, I should have scrolled that down, is unknown, it does not seem justified to say definitively that there is no risk. Some indirect evidence suggests that low EPA and DHA levels in vegetarian children could be associated with risks, because a small percentage of ingested alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA, is converted to EPA and then DHA through endogenous processes, supplementation with vegetarian sources of ALA can improve the EPA and DHA. However, the below normal levels of EPA and DHA found in vegetarians could potentially put children at risk for impaired brain and CNS development. So, short version, breaking that down. Yes, things like flax and hemp and other plant-based sources of omega-3s, the ALA, the alpha-linolenic acid, yes, those potentially can be bioconverted, converted to the icosapentaenoic and the docosahexaenoic, the EPA, DHA, the actual omega-3s in your body. That being said, it is an inefficient process, and you're going to need to get a lot more in order to reach the same levels of EPA and DHA that you would be able to obtain simply from eating fish and or grass-fed meat and or dairy. If you want your kid to be smart and have properly formed genitalia and be emotionally cognizant and do well in life and all those things, let's keep going. We're almost done. Mental health. There is currently an epidemic of depression among young people in developed countries, including the US. Supplementation with EPA, but not DHA, has been shown to significantly improve depression. A recent meta-analysis found an association between low fish intake and depression, presumably due to the high EPA content of fish. This gives some reason to believe that young vegetarians and vegans who consume very little EPA or none at all may be at increased risk for depression. In fact, there is empirical evidence linking vegetarianism and low meat consumption to depression and to contemplating and attempting suicide in adolescence. Yet another reason. But again, let's move forward. Omega-6 to omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid ratio. Hunter-gatherers consume omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in a ratio of about 1:1, while Westerners consume them in a ratio of about 15:1 or higher. I've seen upwards of 30:1 and even higher than that sometimes. There is an ongoing controversy about the significance of the omega-6 to omega-3 polyunsaturated fat ratio in the diet, but some evidence seems to connect a high ratio with chronic systemic inflammation that can potentially lead to or aggravate autoimmune diseases, some of which may manifest in adolescence. Now, controlling for ethnicity, populations that consume relatively little omega-6 relative to omega-3 have low rates of autoimmune diseases, such as inflammatory bowel disease, relative to their Western and Westernized populations. The anti-inflammatory properties of omega-3 appear to be largely due to EPA and DHA rather than ALA, which is the plant form. As noted, vegetarians consume little EPA and DHA, while vegans consume none at all. Some evidence suggests that high levels of omega-3 fatty acid, especially EPA and DHA, in conjunction with omega-6 fatty acids, leads to anti-inflammatory effects, regardless of the ratio. So that's part of the controversy. Now, whether the ratio itself or only the amount of EPA DHA are consumed is a crucial factor in reducing inflammation has not been resolved. So basically, like I said before during the earlier part about whether you should just be trying to eat more omega-3s or trying to reduce your omega-6, there is controversy there. I personally lean on the ratio team. I think that the ratio of 6:3 overall is more important than the absolute or the how much omega-3 you're actually getting in overall. I still think you do need more than not. Having said that, mega dosing on fish oil may not be the best bet. You may be better off reducing the 6, increasing the 3, and getting that ratio closer to in line. Now, vegetarian and vegan diets have high 6:3 ratios. Russell et al. Found that the ratio of plasma levels of linoleic acid to EPA and DHA in British omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans to be 12.6, 20, and 35.7 respectively. Again, that high ratio is harmful. Is harmful per se is known. It was worded very awkwardly. Again, the possibility that the high ratio is harmful per se is not settled science. But we also cannot say decisively that it is not harmful. A&D's position statement on vegetarianism does not address the question of the 6:30 PUFA ratio. In any case, low EPA and DHA intake appears to lead to chronic systemic inflammation regardless of the ratio. Thus, it is possible that the low intake of EPA and DHA, perhaps in conjunction with a high intake of omega-6 fatty acids in vegetarians, might increase the risk of developing autoimmune diseases such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, psoriasis, and lupus in childhood or adolescence. So up your threes, drop the sixes, ready to rock. Last one. Here we go. Conclusions. We're already at an hour and 15 at this point, and thank you guys for staying on. And if you're watching on the replay, even crazier. But this paper has reviewed direct and indirect evidence that vegetarian and vegan diets may be associated with serious risks for the fetuses and growing children. This evidence for the dangers of vegetarianism is not necessarily decisive. However, the question is whether the AND is justified in making a blanket claim that an appropriately planned vegetarian vegan diet that substitutes milk, soy legumes, or eggs for meat are as healthy and appropriately planned omnivorous diets for children. The evidence reviewed here suggests that there are still many unknowns about the health effects of a meatless diet in children. Parents ought to be informed that the debate about the health effects of vegetarianism in children is not settled one way or the other. Now, while that's the case, and as a scientific paper, it has to at least be more balanced and say that it's not settled science, and it's true, it's not. But based on everything we went through today, give your kids some damn meat, all right? Period. Let's end it there. All right, guys, so any last questions before we start closing it out? Because like I said, we are already an hour 15 in. So while I'm waiting for your last question, just again, remember, Fire Cream, basically here, hopefully soon, probably this week, we're going to be letting her loose. If you haven't already, head over to facebook.com/thefirecream. And from there, it's going to be thefirecream.com. And you'll be able to reach out to me directly as well. But, yeah, I think that's about it, guys. Thanks for coming by. Love y'all. And I'll see you next week.
Dropped the 9 in the mail.